Oh, hey there. Thanks for stopping by. Every saw that I have fixed has been picked up. And let's have a look at the repair lineup. There's been a few more things come in, I think. So here we have a 361 that doesn't run right. We have a Shindiwa top handle that doesn't run right. We have a 261 that got clipped by a skid steer, and I have went ahead and ordered the parts for it, and they've just arrived. I have an 038 that is hard to start. A Husky 562 that makes bad noises. 461 for service. There's a combi unit. Not sure why that's here. A two-man Hornet for a service. An 026, 026, 024, and an MS360, all here for various things. So right now, let's start with this MS361. Get on my workbench. Good morning. Welcome back to my workbench. My name is Erica, and I am so glad that you're here. Today in the bench, we have a Stihl MS361. The customer who dropped this off said that the gas cap leaks, it will run, and it won't idle. He's lost a bar nut. He needs a new bar and chain. The carb screws have been messed with, and that it needs a new air filter. So the 361, I've done a little bit of reading about these. They produced these saws between 2003 and 2010. Prior to the 361, you had the MS360, and prior to that, you had the Stihl 036, which we've done a couple of videos on recently. The current model now is called an MS362. So this is a 59cc professional chainsaw. The 361, to many, is a highly sought after saw. This saw was produced prior to emissions regulations. There's no stratification, no catalytic converter. This is considered a dirty chainsaw in today's standards. New value of a saw like this, a 362, you're looking at approximately $1,100 Canadian. Although you can no longer buy a 361 in North America, you can buy it in other parts of the world. Brazil, for example, on their website offers the 361 as well as the MS260 and a saw called a 382, which is like an 038. Well, let's jump into this. Come along with me and let's find out why this saw won't idle. Well, here we are with what looks to be a very well-used Stihl MS361. So just looking for anything external that stands out. Handles, plastics. A little sticker here. I wonder if the date of manufacture, 2004. There is a little AV buffer, kind of donut style buffer that's supposed to be on a peg up in there. I can see that it's no longer there. They often rot out. I don't know if the bar oil helps them, but I've done a 361 video before, and that same buffer was rotted off. So depending on what the saw needs, we may end up replacing that buffer. We'll check out all the AV mounts. My voice might sound a little funny today. I've been a little bit sick the last couple days, a little bit of a sore throat. I'd like to take this saw outside and hear it run. We're going to check his fuel, Make sure there's some bar oil in it. And I'd like to hear what he was hearing, the running issue. So let's see if there's fuel in it. And somebody stole my flashlight. I'll be right back. Guess where I found it? In someone else's toolbox. Oh, there isn't much fuel in it at all. Somebody must have dumped it out. No, let's see if I can get anything out of it. Got a clean cup here. That's too bad. I do like to see the fuel that people are trying to run the saw with. But I guess we won't be today. There's a little bit of, a few specks of dirt in the tank, but it's pretty clean. Barrier cream. I'm going to pull that fuel line and fuel filter out of there. Just want to see what kind of condition they're in. So that fuel line doesn't feel great. And it's, you see that it's barely gripping that fuel filter. Like, yeah, it shouldn't. I'm just going to do a quick test here and pressurize that fuel line. And we'll just see if that fuel line's leaking. Got my Stihl pressure vac tester here. This is a Mighty Vac. I bought this from Stihl, and I just put that fitting on it. So I'll take the fuel filter off. See, it shouldn't pull off that easy. Hopefully I can get a good connection with this, but if a fuel line is in poor enough condition, I may not even be able to do the test. We'll see. Okay, so I am on pressure. And that fuel line is not in great condition. See if it may just leak right at the connection because it's so loose and sloppy. Hear that? Now whether it's leaking there or leaking somewhere else. I just put a different fitting in here. This might work better. Okay, so that goes right up to there. That should... I can hear it leaking. It could be the upper part of the fuel line. It could be the carb. But whatever it is, we definitely have some fuel system problems here. That fuel filter is likely original to the saw. That is old. So I just put his fuel filter back on. I'm going to put a little bit of fuel in this. We're going to step outside with it, and I want to see if I can start it. And we'll hear, if it'll run, we'll hear what a saw sounds like that it has, you know, these conditions, a leak, old fuel line, whatever's going on with this thing. We'll see if it'll run for us for a minute. I don't have high hopes that we'll hear this thing run, but we'll just give it a try. There's lots of bar oil in it. All right, well, let's step outside and see what this thing will do for us. I'll meet you out there. run. Well, that kind of went as I expected, so it does not run well. I'm going to dump that fuel back out of it, and then we're going to go through this saw, find its faults, and then we will quote the customer. Let's pull this air filter cover off. Check out the air filter spark plug. Okay, so that is a dirty air filter. This saw has been ingesting some fines. I didn't catch it on film, but the sound of that snapping when it came loose. I'm not sure this cover has ever been off this chainsaw. I'm going to bet that this thing probably has the original spark plug in it. Spark plug is not tight. So the spark plug was not tight, but the gasket is crushed. So maybe he had it pulled out and looked at it and just put it back in, but didn't put it back in tight. That's an old plug. You can see the wear marks on it from the coil wire. It's likely the original plug. So far, I believe we have found the original fuel filter, the original spark plug, and possibly the original air filter. Let me grab my camera and we'll take a quick peek down the hole. So it looks pretty good down in there. A little bit of carbon on the piston. The cylinder looks good. By this saw not running correctly for him, it probably saved itself. Let's go ahead and do a compression test. Okay, so about 150 pounds of compression. Let's pull the carburetor off of this. Okay, throttle linkage is disconnected. Can you see the filth of this? So I believe that I am the first person to ever put a tool on this chainsaw. I mean, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure. There we go. This thing has never been cleaned. What do you think? Oh, look at that crack in the fuel line there. I'll try to zoom in so you can see it. Well, it's the next day here, and I may be sicker than I was yesterday, but I'm going to give this a go. So before I go any further with this power head, I want to check out this carburetor and make sure the needle and seat are good in it. I have seen 361 carbs in the past that the seat was no good in it, and the seats are non-replaceable in them. So you can replace the whole carburetor or attempt a repair. But let's check into this thing before we do anything else. I'm going to go over and give this thing a cleanup, an external cleanup. I'll be right back. Okay, there's our carburetor cleaned up. So the limiter caps are still in there, but you can see that someone's been in there digging around in them. You cannot adjust your way out of a rotten, cracked fuel line. Got my pressure vac test tool here. I'm going to hook up to this carburetor, 10 pounds of pressure, and we're going to see if the needle and seat are holding in this. Okay, so we're on pressure. We'll go to 10 pounds. Looks good to me. If that needle and seat weren't sealing, you would see this would not hold like that. All right, that's good news. Let's open this carb up quick and just take a quick look inside. Today we'll use the carb stand that Scott sent me from the Greasy Shop Rag. Just want to see how it looks, make sure there's no rust or corrosion. There's a magnet on the back of that stand. Neat, eh? The screen's got some stuff in it there. So this side of the carburetor looks pretty good. I don't see any rust. I don't see corrosion. So the top end of that fuel line, I showed you there, it's cracked. It was literally sucking dirt through it, and there you can see where it got caught in the screen. It's a good thing this thing wouldn't run for him, because he probably just would have kept on using it until it was dead. He tried to adjust it to make it run better. That's pretty crispy. So this carb needs to be cleaned and rebuilt. For now, we will get this carburetor out of the way. We'll take care of that after. We are going to pressure vac test the saw and make sure it's tight before we clean up and overhaul the fuel system. I'll remove the decomp valve, and then we'll put a plug in there. I'll put his spark plug back in. Let's block our intake and impulse up. Okay, so put a couple washers on. I know some of you are probably thinking, oh my, why hasn't she cleaned that saw up yet? So I will clean this saw up once I know it's tight and once I know that we are repairing the saw. And when it's all sealed up is a good time to clean it. So we got our intake and impulse blocked off. We got our spark plug back in. Our decomp plug is in. So let's plug up our exhaust. There's a T27 on the side right there. So you don't usually see me take a bolt out sideways here at the muffler. This is a Husqvarna Dolmar kind of thing. But on these 361s, Stihl did a sideways bolt there. And then they'd stop doing it. I don't know if they were experimenting, but you only really see that on 361s on a Stihl. Just a useless little tidbit of information for you. There's T27s up in there to loosen off. Neither of those were tight in there. So the muffler, those two muffler bolts weren't tight. And you can see, let's see if I can zoom in. You can see where the muffler had been vibrating, had been loose. Let's go ahead and block our exhaust port off. Use that. Okay, so exhaust is blocked. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 manufactured holes, and they are all blocked. So I'll grab my pressure vac tester, we'll hook up, and we will pull vacuum. Okay, vacuum. 0.5 bar. It's not really what I felt like seeing today. That's a leak. Okay, well, make sure it's not my tool. Thumb on the end. So my tool is working fine. Okay, so we have a vacuum leak. I have verified that my tool is working. Our piston is at bottom dead center. So the next thing I should do is I'm going to move this over to pressure. We'll see if we have a pressure leak, which we do. So let's verify that none of my connections are working. Like my exhaust block there, like that, it could leak. I've seen it happen before. So before we jump to any conclusions, let's make sure that I didn't mess this up first. Okay, let me grab my soapy water. Here it is. Yeah, that's a fast leak. That's I think my exhaust block is fine. I don't see any bubbling there. And it loses pressure fast. It's not the decompression plug. It's not the spark plug. Just look at this intake closer. So I don't detect any leaks at my connections, but when I put pressure to it, I don't know if you'll be able to hear it or not. I can hear the leak wherever it is. We've just got to find it now. We've got a vacuum and pressure leak. So it would have been easy to look at that fuel line, that rotten, cracked fuel line, and think, oh, let's just put a new fuel line in it, and let's throw a rebuild kit in that carburetor and slap this thing back together. We'd go outside with it, and we'd wonder why it still wouldn't run for us. So if I would have done any fuel system work to this, I would have been wasting my time. We have a chainsaw that's about 20 years old that is obviously not taken very good care of. We have fuel system problems. We have some worn out AV mounts, and we have a major vacuum and pressure leak. Maybe a crank seal, maybe two crank seals, got an intake boot in there. We've got a saw here with multiple problems. So I'm going to have to call him and see if he wants me to continue on here. But I came out here feeling sick, and now I feel even sicker. So I'll see you guys in the morning. Good morning, everybody. I'm feeling much better today than I was yesterday. Not 100%, but much, much better. So I gave the customer a call about this chainsaw. explained the fuel issues, some worn out AV mounts, and that we have an air leak somewhere in the saw, and that I could spend a bit more time to determine exactly where the leak was. And I could barely get my words out, and he said he's not interested. He thought maybe if it was just in need of a, basic tune-up, new spark plug, air filter, stuff like that, he might have fixed it, but he has no interest in going into any depth in this chainsaw. So he would like to buy a new one. The day he dropped this off, he was looking at a new MS362, and he has asked me to get one ready for him. And he's asked me to dispose of the saw for him. He said it's worked hard for 20 years and it owes him nothing. Please throw it out. I would never throw this out. I told him I will handle the arrangements for it. Speaking of chainsaw disposals, if you go to your owner's manual of your saw, there is a section on disposal. Contact the local authorities or your Stihl servicing dealer for information on disposal. Do not throw your saw in the garbage. Take it to your nearest Stihl dealer for recycling. He was able to confirm that this saw has the original fuel filter, original spark plug, and original air filter, and that this saw has been to a shop once in 20 years, and that was very early on in its life, where it went in to have the coil replaced. So he said, other than that coil, this saw has never been touched by a tech. Well, we are no longer on customer time. We are now on Erica time. So let's fully diagnose this chainsaw, find out exactly what's wrong with it and what it needs. Let's go. Get this out of the way for now. I'll get my tool hooked back up here. Anybody want to make a bet of where we're going to find a leak or leaks in the saw? Make your bet now in the comments before we get started. All right, there you go. You can see it good there. And we are going to pull vacuum first. I'm going to put some oil on that crank seal, and then I'll pull vacuum, and we will watch the oil to see what happens. Okay, are we ready? You're losing vacuum. But are we losing it there? I'm going to go over to pressure, see what happens. Oh, yes. So that's oil, that's bubbles. Someone once told me that you would never see oil bubble, but I think right now we're watching oil bubble. That's crazy, eh? So the first thing I did there when I put oil in there is I pulled vacuum, and it didn't leak for the first, I don't know, 30 or 40 seconds maybe. Almost like the oil temporarily sealed it. And then I moved over to pressure, and here's what happened. So that's a pretty serious leak. The pressure gauge. I'll just move this and show you. Wow. I just used a blue shop towel and just soaked up the bit of oil that was in there. I'm going to pull that crank seal out right now, pop a new one in, and then we will retest. I was having trouble getting onto that crank seal, and I just looked it up, and I've got the wrong jaws installed on this for this saw. So I'm going to pull these off and put the right ones on. I need number 6, and these are number 4s. Okay, so after some fussing around, I got that crank seal out. So there's the crank bearing right there. All kinds of dirt in it. So between it, sucking dirt past the crank seal and the saw running the original dirty air filter. There's dirt got into the bearing. It's loud. I don't like it. So I'm not going to put a crank seal in this right now. Well, let's pop the cylinder off of this. There's a cable in here that broke probably a long time ago. This little piece just fell out. It's just been rattling around in there. See that? It looks okay. There's, I don't know, some kind of, there's a buildup in it. But it's not, doesn't look damaged. The piston looks okay. I don't know if you can hear this. The crank bearings are loud. This saw's had a lot of dirt ingestion through the crank seal, the original 20-year-old air filter. Yeah, I don't like that. There's no play, just loud bearings. So if I was going to repair this saw, this would be a disassembly, a total cleanup, new crank bearings, probably a new set of rings, and then everything else that we found, crank seals, some worn out AV mounts, missing AV mount, fuel system work, quite a bit of stuff really. So I guess what we'll do for now that we've had a deep look at this, is I'll box it up, label the box, and it'll go out back into my project pile, and maybe we'll get to it this winter. If I didn't have a whole lineup of saws waiting to be looked at, I may tackle it, but I've got too much lined up over there. We had 5 saws come in today. So we'll box this thing up. I wonder if I have room back there. There must be a lot of saws back there. I better go have a look.